focus more on fit with the VC and the VCs that you reach out to and being thoughtful and intentional about that
Yeah.
than just brand name and valuation. A lot of founders come at this and say, I have to raise from this top tier VC, and they just approach it in that way, and then they over-index on the price they're getting. Whereas oftentimes it's more about, is this VC interested in the space? Do they know the space? Do they get it? Can they provide the right level of resources that you as the founder need to get your company off the ground? Will they be there and spend time with you and actually think about the business and help you solve problems? I think a lot of times we don't hear enough founders think about it that way.
Welcome to Inside the Process, where you get to learn about raising capital from founders, funders, and attorneys who have just done it. I'm Helena Fogarty. I'm a fundraising expert who helps startups raise their seed and Series A rounds. And today, I'm speaking with Samir Bakhru of Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe, one of the most prominent law firms in the startup ecosystem. Orrick has been counsel to thousands of emerging companies and the venture capital firms that back them. Samir leads the firm's global technology practice and works closely with founders starting from pre-seed, helping them navigate everything from incorporation and cap table structuring to term sheet negotiations and closing financing rounds. Samir and his team at Orrick don't just handle the legal paperwork. They're strategic advisors who often take on risk alongside founders, offering deferred fee arrangements and counsel that can make or break a fundraising round. Beyond just financings, they can help startups decode the legal and regulatory issues in their products and market so that they can take action in a scalable way. Let's dive into the legal side of fundraising and learn what founders need to know to set themselves up for success. All right, Samir, it's so nice to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about startups and founders and all things tech.
Me too.
Let's do it.
I'd love to, just learn what got you into this field.
Yeah. So I bit the startup bug quite a number of years ago. Actually, it predated even becoming a lawyer. I was, sort of finishing up college at the time, had friends that were delving into the startup space, and I started helping a very close friend of mine that was building a SaaS startup, probably 15 years ago. And I just found the whole space of working with friends that were founders at the ground level, building something unique, very exciting. And it sort of changed my entire perception about what a career in tech and business could mean. And I knew I wanted to go to law school. And so for a while, I wasn't quite sure how I was going to marry the two together. But it sort of just actually ended up happening very naturally for me right as I graduated from law school. And I found, a wonderful place to be in Orrick, where I got a chance to work with founders and helping them build their companies, both from a business or legal perspective. But, for me, it all started back in Atlanta, just sort of working with friends on the weekend on trying to build up a consumer-facing application.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And what interested you about becoming a lawyer?
So, I think like a lot of people, I had a view of the law around courtrooms and litigation and just sort of lobbying for clients in a more formal setting. But then as I started to get into the startup world and I started to go to law school, I realized that there was this whole business side of being a lawyer that just isn't really apparent to you when you start the process of becoming a lawyer. It became apparent to me, and actually our law school, I went to Michigan, so go Blue, big Wolverine fan. Our law school actually did a great job of opening up pathways in the law that were a little bit non-traditional. And to be frank, I went down the traditional path at first. I was like, oh, I want to work at a big New York law firm. And I actually ended up there for a short period of time. But our law school did a very, very good job of showing us things that most law students don't get access to. So a small example of this was when I was a third-year law student, I basically spent my entire third year working with startups and venture funds. I did this clinic where, as a lawyer, I was providing free advice to early stage companies, pre-seed companies, just getting off the ground, helping them form their companies, talking to founders about the types of things they should put in place when they're starting their companies, how to approach conversations with investors. And like, frankly, at the time, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just figuring it out. And at the same time, our school provided opportunities to, on the business side, basically shadow VCs in the Detroit ecosystem,
That's great.
which was awesome.
Yeah.
And I got to see both sides of that. And then when I graduated, I was like, look, I'm going to New York. I got to find a way to crack into the startup ecosystem there, and I have to find a way to do it using my law degree. And it just so happened that Orrick was the right place for me at the right time.
Yeah.
As it so happens.
Yeah, I think when you grow up, if you're not, like I have a family of lawyers, so if you don't know that part of it, like you think litigation,
Right.
you think what you see on television or movies. And
Right.
my dad actually went to law school to get into business because his parents wouldn't let him go to business school. And he became an investment banker. So there's this whole part of it that we need lawyers.
Totally. And even with the advent of AI, it's not going away.
No, it's not.
People need someone to blame, right? Like as they say. So we're not going away. I just think it's going to be we're just going to be able to give another segment of the market better and higher access to better and higher quality legal advice at better pricing.
Yeah.
That's the way I think the world is going to move. Hot
Nice.
take.
Let's hope.
Let's hope.
And why did you choose, law firm representing startups versus working for a VC?
Well, one, I did go to law school, and I frankly I like the consigliere relationship aspect of working with founders. Like, it was being at a law firm, you get to see a ton of different startups at a bunch of different stages across their lifespan. I work with, and we work with startups, as you said, very, very early pre-seed, 2 guys or 2 gals in a garage just getting their new project off the ground, to some of the largest and most successful startups in the world, like Stripe and others. And I liked the ability to just sort of work with companies cross-scale, cross-life cycle, cross-industry, cross-vertical. And that is a little bit hard to do unless you work at a very, very specific subset of venture funds.
Mm-hmm.
Law firms give you that access. And I like, candidly, I sort of like the therapy aspect of being a, kind of therapist for founders, to be able to call and pick up the phone and just talk through an issue real time, whether it be a legal issue or a business issue or a relationship issue about how to deal with an investor. I felt like this career gave me access to that in a way that a lot of careers would not.
Yeah. I love that because that's how my lawyer, when I was raising, felt.
Right.
Like I was able to pick up the phone, chat with him. He gave me some great insight. I don't know that everyone has that point of view or that understanding that your counsel can be that person helping you through these things.
I think that is a very misunderstood point.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be honest with you. I think that is one of the things that founders fail at very early on, is they actually over-index on cost of legal services,
Mhm.
and they under-index on the right fit. It's actually very much the same as how you should evaluate a VC from my perspective, right? When you're an early stage company, valuation is really important, no doubt. Like you should try to get the best valuation for your company based on how much capital you're raising, and we can talk about how to think about that. But if you're picking a VC to support you, you do not only want to focus on just the headline number,
Mm-hmm.
you want to focus on the fit with that VC. Do they get it? Do they get you? Are they going to be there with you when times are tough? Because there will be times that are tough.
Yeah.
And the business will struggle, right? It's the same when you pick a lawyer. Like, you really should feel like you can pick up the phone and call them anytime, day or night, or text them.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I have this issue. I have this business issue. Let's talk through it. Can you give me your insight, your perspective, whatever it is? And there are a lot of founders that just don't know that that's kind of the way that the startup ecosystem when it comes to law works.
Yeah.
And they over-index on a couple thousand here or a couple thousand there in terms of legal costs. Then I get it. You gotta, you have to stretch every single dollar. But legal is an area where this lawyer and this firm is going to be with you from day one until IPO or M&A or a wind down. And you have to make sure that you have the right person backing you. And that makes all the difference in the world.
It really does. Yeah, it really does. And as someone who had to wind down a startup, my own startup, and then was hired to wind down a startup, like the legal counsel there was incredible as well.
Absolutely.
And empathetic.
And empathetic.
Yes.
And honestly, the best way to figure that out, aside from just having casual conversations with them, talking to them about how they approach things with other companies or VCs that they work with, is you shouldn't hesitate to ask your lawyer for referrals from other founders. Pick up the phone, talk to other founders they work with. They'll tell you how they behaved when things were difficult or when things were great, and that will tell you a lot about the personality and firm that you're dealing with.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how do you get clients?
So we get clients in a variety of different ways, right? The first is what we just touched on. We pride ourselves in doing great work, excellent work, the best quality work we can for our founders and our companies and our venture funds. And if we do that and we do it successfully and we're efficient at it, hopefully they refer us more companies and their founder friends. Like, that to me is the best referral source. And I always tell that to every new attorney that enters our space. One of the unique things about our space in the law is that it affords you access to people on management teams and access to being able to learn how to develop business and sell very early on in your career.
Yeah.
That is not the case when you work with most big law firms in New York City. You do not have access to that until very much later in your career. Firms like us, we offer those kind of opportunities and what I consider life skills early on. So we tell our associates when they work with us, like, if you knock it out of the park, you invest yourself in these founders, these clients, you get to know them. When you move up in your career and you start building your practice, your best referral source and business generation is going to come from that community of people that you worked with. Outside of that, we do a lot in terms of just market-facing events. Like, we make ourselves very available and accessible to the venture ecosystem. We're always out there partnering with VC funds to put on really great events for founders and tech companies, whether it's to talk about some trending topic or put out resources that they might find interesting or helpful as they build their companies. Outside of that, I would say we put a lot of great tools and resources into the market that give us, access to these companies because they realize, like, oh, maybe this firm does know a little bit about what they're doing in the startup ecosystem.
Right, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. So we'll talk about this, but we have a great tool out there called Orrick Tech Studio. We basically make all of our forms and documents free at the early stage.
Incredible.
So that, founders have access to them.
Yeah.
We've built a program called Greenhouse, where even companies that aren't like necessarily our quote unquote our clients yet, we give them access to a gentleman named Patrick Berry and his team, who they basically just provide business and operational advice to startups at the earliest stages and to founders in a non-legal way, just to help them scale and figure out how to bring a product to market or solve some sort of problem. And it's not the kind of thing you see most law firms doing, but we provide those services because we realize it's essential to a startup starting, and founders need all the help they can get. So, a combination of all of these things sort of helps create a bit of a funnel for us. And I would say maybe the last piece of this is, like, we're very, very active in the accelerator and incubator market. We do a lot of work with Y Combinator. We do a lot of work with Prod. We do a lot of work with a number of different accelerators in the market. And we try to make ourselves accessible to them. We provide unique fee arrangements to incentivize them to work with us. And we provide a lot of resources that, many other service providers in the market do not provide.
So when a founder approaches Orrick, how do you evaluate them?
So, going back to the prior analogy, it's not unlike many venture investors at the early stages evaluate a startup. We, as a law firm, we throw a lot of darts at the board in this practice. And the types of things I look at, everybody's a little bit different, but the types of things I look at this stage in my career are, well, one, who referred this founder to me, right? Is it coming from
important.
So important. Is it coming from a trusted referral source, or, did they just watch Inside the Process podcast and decide to call me, right? Like, where is this coming from?
Which is also good.
Right.
By the way.
So that's like the first right there. I got to check. Number two is, what's the composition of the team? Who is it? Is it a do they have a sort of a business focused founder? Do they have a technical founder? And what are they trying to build, right? If a startup comes to me and they don't have a technical team, they're building a highly technical product, that may be something I think about in terms of the type of help they need and how much in way of resources we give them early on. We also evaluate, frankly, to the best of our ability, the product that they're building and whether we think there's product market fit, right? We're not as good at evaluating that probably as VCs are, because that's all they do all day long. But we see thousands of deals a year and work with 4,000 plus startups and have been doing it for 30 years. So we have a little bit of a sense of whether we think a company is building something that might have legs. And sometimes we're wrong about it. But we do evaluate all of those things as we think about whether this is a company that we should work with or not. And of course, like as a service provider, we always err on the side of being more open to working with companies than not, right? It's our bar is not necessarily the same as a venture fund, but we do have sort of a little bit of a staging and a gating to companies that reach out to us.
Yeah. Do you have any red flags that you are automatically like, not the right fit for us right now?
I wouldn't say it's like an automatic, but I think some of the types of red flags that we think about are a little bit of what we discussed around. Do we also, as their firm, have some conviction around the product market fit? Do we think that the dynamic amongst the founding team is right and the right mix? And this is something that our investor side clients, in our view, would get excited about. And then I also kind of think a little bit about what is the founder talking to us about from day one, right? Are they super focused on valuation and control, or are they focused on building the product and putting together the right team and getting the right fit of investors together, right? A lot of it is like, what direction does the conversation head? And similarly, if they approach the conversation with like solely a focus on cost, sometimes that also raises a red flag on like, what are they really looking for, right? Are they looking for a strategic advisor that can be there with them throughout the life cycle of their company and support them? Or are they looking to just save as much money as possible? So these are the types of things we think about. And has the startup founder started a company before?
Right.
Right? Is this their first go at it? So I think we sort of put all those pieces together and make a decision in terms of whether or not to work with a company. But as I said, we generally provide as many resources as we can provide to early stage companies at no cost, with the hope that they're successful and we get to be there along the ride with them and help them on every future financing round.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a spectrum, for lack of a better term, but on one end, second, third time founder with an exit.
Right.
Great team.
Right.
Ready to go to the moon.
Right.
And then over here, you have people who are first time founders.
Right.
Who may not have the same vision yet and are earlier. So how do people find the right size legal counsel for them when they're early stage? If they're not the second or third time founder.
It's a great question. And to your point on a spectrum, there's also a spectrum of law firms that service this space, right? On the one end, you have solo practitioners that do this, or fractional general counsels that do this in their spare time, and they help new startups get off the ground and provide them support at very low cost. You also have, and now today you have AI tools online that are available, right? And startups that provide some form of legal services, like a Clerky or a Stripe Atlas. And then you have mid-size law firms that focus on the startup market, a few that we were discussing earlier. And then you have the incumbents, like you have the Orricks and the Coolies and the Goodwins of the world that do a great job. I would say this. I think the way that the market has developed over the years, if you're a startup founder that has a lot of conviction around your idea, and it's not just something that you're like teasing out or just exploring, you're going to dive headfirst into this and you're going to build your company, I would go all the way to the right side of the spectrum and pick a firm that really knows what they're doing in the space and can scale with you, and pick a partner at that firm that you jive with.
Yeah.
That's what I would tell you to do, because we get it. We understand that we are taking a risk with the founders. We are there to make some investment alongside in way of time and thus our dollars, and put our chips on the table. And at the end of the day, all of us do that to some degree or another. And you really want to make sure that you have the right startup partner that can help you avoid those critical mistakes early on. And the difference in cost is not that dramatic.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I find a lot of founders making mistakes on is they tend to be very penny-wise, pound-foolish in some cases. And those $2,000 to $3,000 difference in decisions end up costing them, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal costs, or even millions of dollars later on down the line. Like, I can tell you a story. This was probably 10 years ago at this point. I was involved in selling a company, and, that company, very, very, very successful company we represented. And I think the company at the time had used, not one of the top firms in the space before they came to us. They weren't very buttoned up about their documentation early on. And of course, they were looking at a 9-figure plus sale, which 10 years ago was pretty large.
Yeah.
One of the first in this space. And they had an ex-co-founder who nobody knew about, nobody had heard about. Their name was on a accelerator application somewhere at one point. Of course, when you're successful, people come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
And that happens in the startup space all the time. And this is what I tell founders about. You have to button it up early. This person came out of the woodwork, held the whole deal up. They extracted millions of dollars of value out of that transaction for having pretty much done nothing over the past 10, 12 years of building that company.
Yeah.
And that problem could have been solved if the founders had just worked with the right firm from the beginning. And that is not while that is maybe a slightly extreme example, as a theme, it's not an uncommon thing.
I don't think it's extreme. I can think of a founder that, a founding team right now that has this issue, then they're just getting started. And they need to resolve that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And when you think about the common themes of mistakes, that was one of just picking the right partner and not being, too focused on small differences in cost. The other is having hard conversations with your founders.
Yes.
The number of founders I talk with when they set up a company and there's multiple co-founders, they don't want to have the tough discussion around roles and responsibilities. They don't want to have the tough discussion on who's going to be on the board and ultimately, make the final decision on things, including who's going to stay on the team. They don't want to have the hard discussion around vesting schedules. You have to have those discussions before you raise a priced round.
Yeah.
Because once you go and you start raising a priced round from investors and numbers start floating around on paper, everybody's perception of what they're entitled to changes. And your leverage as a founder and a company changes dramatically.
Yeah.
So if you have the tough conversations early, it will, of course, be a little painful, but it will set you up on a path for success that, will hopefully not be fraught with a bunch of these stumbles that could have been avoided early on.
Yeah. And we're not talking about an extreme example. Maybe the numbers were extreme, but as we're talking, I can think of 4 different startups that I know who have gone through this with ex-co-founders and debt equity and not wanting to deal with it. And there's one company that just raised, a priced round and had to pay an ex-co-founder $200,000. And they got off easy.
That got off easy.
Yeah, they got
Could
off
be
easy.
way worse.
Yeah.
And debt equity is a real thing.
Yeah.
Because once you give someone equity, if it's not subject to vesting and there's not, performance or service-based requirements around it, it really can kill the company. And that is one of those red flags that if you are pitching to sophisticated investors in the market that do this type of work and invest in early stage companies day in and day out, this is something they will look at early on. And it is a red flag that if you haven't sort of put these basic structures in place, they may not invest.
Yeah.
And you may not be able to get anyone to invest, and your company may be dead on arrival.
And that also might be leverage to talk to this person and say, hey, our company's going to go under unless you
Right.
resolve this with us now.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
these are the types of things that you should leverage your counsel for. These are the types of things your counsel will talk to you about in terms of setting up the company. And they're very low cost things to put in place.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't put them in place early, it'll be very difficult.
It's not going to go away.
No, and another example of that is like, I think people also misunderstand kind of what intellectual property is and is not in the startup world. I think a lot of startup founders think of it as like, oh, it's just patents or just trademark. And we don't have any of that. So we don't need to assign our IP to the business. And that's not true.
Yeah.
Right? It's the strategy, it's the thinking, it's the business model. All of that stuff is your secret sauce.
Yeah.
And you as the founding team and everybody that touches your business better be signing a document that assigns that IP to the business. Because if they don't, guess what? Your investors are going to ask about it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a clean chain of title, they're not going to invest. And it's a very uncomfortable conversation to go to somebody after the fact and say, hey, will you assign all of this to the company? And they ask why. And you're like, well, we can't raise this mega round unless you do. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to extract value from you, right?
Yes, they are.
It's a really difficult thing to do, but you can solve for it by just having the right steps in place early.
Yeah. Have there been moments when you've bet on a founder early on and it's paid off, or vice versa?
Definitely. There have definitely been moments where I've bet on a founder, or I've worked with a VC who has come to me and said, look, this is going to be really painful. We have to fix this company. It's going to be really painful. We have to recap the whole thing. And I need you to do it for me and do it at some like really low cost. But I promise it's going to be worth it later. And we take those bets. There have been times where I can think of a recent example, actually, and I can't tell you the name, but it's a company where, probably 3 different people on my team worked on a recap of this company multiple times. And every time we were like, man, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. And lo and behold, 2 years later, this is one of the most prominent companies that we're working with. And it's possible. Mm-hmm. Like, you can turn it around.
Yeah.
If you get the right CEO, you get the right management team, and it's a great product or business, you can turn it around. And so, yeah, we've definitely made those strategic bets. On the flip side, we've also made bets where it's gone totally upside down. Mm-hmm. and we've had to eat some of the financial cost of that.
Yeah.
But again, that's the business we're in.
Yeah.
Right. And we love it and we enjoy it. And I think we think that we have way more wins than we do losses in that space.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about what recapping a company involves?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different flavors of this, but I think we'll start where I'll start is at a high level, which is before you even get to a recap. Oftentimes you'll do a down round. Mm-hmm. And I think for a long time, the word down round had a bit of I don't want to say dirty connotation, but taboo around it.
Yeah. Don't want to do a down round.
Right. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, a ton of companies between 2020 and 2022 raised capital at crazy valuations that in some cases were not justified. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things we talk to founders about in terms of valuation is like, yes, you want the right valuation, but you also don't want it to be so out of line that you can't actually achieve the metrics you need to achieve to raise that next growth round.
Yeah.
But a lot of those companies from 2020 to 2022 raised at numbers that, they just getting to the next round, it was not sustainable. You couldn't justify it when you went to the next growth investor and you saw how the business had performed. And surprisingly, even 3.5 to 4 years later, we're still doing down rounds and recaps for those companies.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to start at the beginning, a down round is not as bad as it seems. It really isn't. Like, founders have this perception that it's this horrible thing. It's not. At the end of the day, all it is you're going to raise capital at a lower valuation than your prior round, and your prior investors are going to get a little bit of an economic adjustment for the lower price that you're raising at. That's it. Fundamentally, that's it. Outside of that, you can control the story, the theme, and how you want to present what just happened to your company to the market. And there's a bunch of different flavors around how down rounds work, but at its core, the amount of economic adjustment that your investors get and ultimately the destruction to the cap table is a function of how much capital you're raising in that down round and how much lower the valuation is. If you're going to raise a small amount of capital, the impact is very, very small. So I just, I push founders to think about it a little bit in that if you do need to raise a down round first, if you need capital for the business to survive, don't be afraid necessarily of raising a down round. Take a moment, pause, think about what's most important for the business, talk to your lawyer, have them build a model for you on what a down round will do to your cap table, and then take it to your board and make a good decision.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned recaps. So what's a recap? So now a recap is really just a more aggressive form of a down round. And that really entails some version of resetting the cap table for the company. Oftentimes it's just, hey, we got to change the business model entirely. What we were doing before doesn't work. We have to start from scratch or go to a totally different market or segment. Or guess what? We have to hire a brand new team and we have to re-incentivize them all over again. And you may have raised a bunch of money and have a very high liquidation stack on the old business. And you can't basically build a new business that will be set up for a path for success with all of this liquidation preference that sits over here. So when that happens, usually a new investor or a group of existing investors will come in and say, great, we'll wipe out that old preference, so long as everybody puts in their pro rata or some money in this new round. And if they agree to do that, then there will be some formula that gets put in place where all of that old preference will go away. Maybe it gets converted down into a smaller percentage of the cap table. They create some sort of new equity plan or pool for the management team to get refreshed. New investors come in, they sit on the top, and you just reset your cap table almost like you were a brand new company from the beginning doing their first price round.
Yeah.
Doing a recap, no doubt, is very difficult. It takes time. It takes a lot of energy. And it is one of the, few things that does, in the venture space from a legal perspective, cost a good bit of money. It's not just because it's complicated to execute on, but there are a lot of conversations that need to be had in a recap. And many of them you need your lawyer for, because you have to explain to investors what's going to happen to their position. And those are very difficult conversations to have.
Yeah. So when you say your lawyer will build a model for this and show you, are you building those models? Do you have analysts? Like, how is this?
Both, actually. Our partners and our associates all know how to build these models.
Wow.
You better. If you want to be in this space, our expectation is that you need to be as close to as facile with the math as possible as your founders and investors are. Because you're in the room with them. You have to be able to make changes and talk through the business side of a deal real time, just like your clients are with their investors. And so you lose a lot of credibility if you can't math the math with them in the room.
Yeah.
So we do it. Now, that being said, with all the tools that are out there today, like a lot of law firms, we have a wonderful team in Wheeling, West Virginia, that is full of analysts and lawyers that provide a lot of these services at a very high level at a lower cost to our startup founders. So yes, we have teams that do full capitalization audits. We have teams that build pro forma and liquidation models and all kinds of innovation tools that we're launching. So, a lawyer that has a higher billable rate can focus on the most important things, and the spreadsheets can, be provided by folks that, are at a lower cost.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the bubble in 2021, early 2022. We're now seeing a very frothy market.
With the exception that I think it's frothy within certain spaces.
Yes. Yes. So how do you think that, early stage investing has evolved based on some of the crazy, well, I shouldn't say crazy, some of the very high valuations we're seeing at early stage for, vertical AI, et cetera. How's that affecting what the landscape of startups looks like?
Sure. Yeah. So I think you have to put AI a little bit on the side
Mhm.
because it's a beast of its own
Yeah.
right now, right? And there are a lot of things going on first of all, like I feel like every startup today, just like every startup a few years ago was a fintech company, every startup is an AI company. You have to have some AI angle to what you're building. Otherwise I feel like people are not going to be interested.
Yeah.
But AI is sort of in a category of its own. But I think right now it is a frothy market. It's a frothy market if you're in one of, I would say four spaces is really interesting right now. One you touched on is AI.
Mhm.
The AI is making up the vast majority of, maybe not the vast majority, but probably 40 to 50% of the financings right now in the market. The next is fintech.
Mhm.
I think if you're a fintech company that has a new and exciting business, people are interested and they want to support that, and that market is evolving real time. Then I would say health tech and life sciences.
Mhm.
With AI and with what's happening in the healthcare space and how costs and delivery of services are changing, like very, very exciting to see what's happening in healthcare. And then I would say aerospace and defense is like
Oh, the
very,
fence is wild.
very
Yeah.
wild. I think if you're in one of those four, you can be tremendously successful and there's a ton of activity. And I think those four, maybe with, energy tech kind of right behind it, those are all like sort of pulling up the market.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult if you're like a consumer founder right now. That's like,
It's a little bit better than like a year ago.
It's a little bit better than a year ago, but that's a really challenging place to be. But, I think ultimately I think if you're in one of those categories, you have a very, high chance of being successful within the percentages of being a startup founder.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're in, but that said, early stage and sort of like mid-stage VCs are still being way, way, way more thoughtful and rigorous
Mm-hmm.
before they provide financing. They are stress testing the business model early. They are turning over every stone when it comes to data and making sure that they have conviction. They are, putting founders through the ringer in terms of how they're evaluating them both like, mentally, emotionally, physically, everything. Can they handle this? And they're making sure that there's a real business model that can get to profitability.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about pumping dollars in for growth and marketing. So I will say that I think in those three spaces, there's a lot more rigor, but those are the hottest spaces right now outside of AI. And then AI is all over the map, right? You've got companies that are true core, hard AI companies that are building, very difficult technologies and they're raising tons of capital. And then you've got just a lot of other excitement around the space where, whether it's legal tech or health tech or something like that, that's AI focused and, investors are going all in. That, whether there's a bubble in that market or not, time will tell.
Mm-hmm.
But there is more activity there than almost anywhere else.
Yeah. So we've seen some AI companies go from nothing to 100 million ARR in like, I don't know, a year.
Sure.
How is that affecting the bar for everybody else when people are raising? Like it feels much harder if you're not on that pathway.
Yes and no. I mean, I think it depends a little bit on where you play in the AI space
Yeah.
and what kinds of like resources you actually need. Nowadays I was talking about this with a founder yesterday. It costs you so much less with the tools that are available to get, product to market,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think the flip side of that coin is yes, there are companies that are getting to 50 million, 100 million ARR or are raising tremendous amounts of money. The other side of that is you also just don't need to raise as much money as you used to build a successful startup.
Yeah.
So like as a founder in the space, I don't think you should necessarily just look at the headlines and succumb to that pressure.
Yeah.
I think you should really think about what it is that you're building and how you get it to market faster and what is the minimal amount of investment that you need to actually get it there and to become profitable. And you can build a tremendously successful business by doing that. But kind of like since you talked about what some of these startups are doing and how much capital they're raising and and what the headlines say, I think one of the other things that like early stage founders need to remember is, and a mistake that they should ultimately avoid, is don't talk about valuation with your VCs from the beginning. Like don't tell the investor what you think the valuation of your company is. Let them tell you. That is like one of the biggest red flags I hear from VCs I talk to when they decide to pass on the company. And instead, focus on how much money you need to get to whatever milestone it is that's next in the next 18 months and what you're willing to give up to get there. And if you have a great business plan and you say, we're going to get product to market and we're going to start generating and we think we can get to 20 million in revenue within 18 months and we need only $5 million to get there, and you lay that out very clearly for the VC, they will tell you what the valuation is and the valuation will flow from there. And at an early stage, it's going to be within a very specific band. So I just tend to counsel founders to think about what it is that they need and very clearly lay that out for the investors that they're talking to.
How do you keep up on what's happening in the market and what the market will bear? Like, what are your sources of information, both internal and external, to Orrick?
Well, we do over 1,000 venture financings a year, much like many of our peers. So we get a pretty good view of what the market will bear because amongst those deals, we take a look at those deals internally and we pull together data from those deals. And for ourselves, we extrapolate trends on what we're seeing in the market. And actually, like that, if you're going back to our earlier conversation on like, how do you pick a law firm? The firms that are the incumbents in the space that are looking at data in the way that we are, that is one of the best services that you can get from firms like ours. You can come to us and you can ask, hey, this term that I'm getting, is it market or is it not? And we can tell you with a fairly high degree of accuracy that only 50 or 60% of the companies that we work with have this term in it, or only 10% of the companies we work with have this term in it, and how you compare against your peers. And that's just data that's not easy to just get by looking, searching on the internet. So we do pretty well by looking at the data that we have. And then, outside of that, I would say the venture ecosystem has evolved in that there are a lot of data sources out there that tell you kind of what's happening in the market, right? PitchBook is a service that many of us subscribe to. Carta has sort of gone well beyond just working on cap tables, and now they produce all kinds of reports on equity and comp and financing data. And so I think between all of those sources and the work that we do for our clients, we tend to have a fairly decent pulse on what's happening in the venture and tech ecosystem.
So let's go into the process. From your perspective, what does doing an early stage financing look like for the founder?
So it depends on, and from my perspective, how much capital you need to raise. That's like the first question you have to ask. And if you're going to raise, people have different views on this, but if you're going to raise less than $2.5 or $3 million, it doesn't really economically make sense to do a priced round. And that's a question I get from a lot of founders, is that, do I do a SAFE or a convertible note, or do I do a priced round? And I usually tell them, well, how much are you raising? They're like, well, we're going to maybe go to some angels or some pre-seed investors, and some of them are going to write, $500,000, $1 million checks, and probably going to come in $2.5, $3 million. I'm like, great, don't do a priced round. And don't do a priced round because it's going to take you 3 to 6 weeks, probably 4 to 6 weeks from the moment you sign a term sheet to have money in the door. It's going to cost you more in terms of legal spend. There's a barrier to entry with that it just won't cost less than. And so at that point, it probably makes sense to just, use the Y Combinator SAFE or use a form of convertible note from your law firm and go out there and raise a round quickly and efficiently to just get some money in the door so you can hire a team and build product and get to market and prove it out. Also because it doesn't oftentimes make sense to raise a priced round unless you have like an anchor investor that's willing to sort of really lead and set the terms.
Yeah.
Many times founders at the early stages are just talking to 4, 5, 6, 10 parties, and it's none of those parties are really capable of necessarily setting the price because it's so early on, nobody really knows. And it can be very difficult to navigate a bunch of different parties like that when you're trying to get aligned on one set of consolidated terms for a priced round.
Yeah.
That said, I think if you're raising more than $3 million and you think you can get one investor to sort of set the terms for everybody else, I would tell you to do a priced round.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say that I think one of the mistakes that a lot of founders make is if they decide not to do the priced round and they raise on a safe, they go out and they raise on safes multiple times.
Yep. Stacking them.
They stack them.
Yeah.
Because it's easy. It's really easy. It's low legal cost. It's changing 2 things in one piece of paper. And everybody understands in the market like what these instruments are used for. But when you think about what's gone bad, I have worked with founders that have gone out and raised 4 or 5 different rounds on a safe before they get to their Series A.
Yeah.
We get to their Series A and the founder realizes they own 20% of their company. And they're like, whoa, I didn't realize that would happen. And so, yeah, it's possible and it creates a lot of havoc. So I would tell you that if you're an early stage founder, you're raising less than 3 million, raise on a safe, move to a priced round, never raise on a safe again if you can avoid it.
Yeah. All right. That's different from my like I was always thinking, Series A, price round, do pre-seed, seed, and then Series A is the price round. But you're even thinking about like, a $5 million seed as a price.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. At that point, there are enough tools and resources out there, and your lawyers can do it efficiently enough that you should be able to get a priced round done, in a $4 to $5 million raise.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because at that point, everybody's on the cap table then. Their equity is locked in, it's set. Everybody shares in the dilution from that point on forward.
Exactly.
Which is not the case with convertible instruments like a safe. And it installs a certain level of governance and rigor in a company that is actually good for founders.
Yeah.
It makes you step back and think twice about decisions you make and how those decisions impact all stockholders in your company and not just, one subset. So
what are some other benefits of doing a price round or having the rigor and the discipline, do you think?
Well, I think number one is the dilution aspect to it.
Yeah.
Right? Like number one,
just knowing what's what.
Knowing what's what,
Yeah.
having the equity on the cap table, and ultimately, if you decide to raise another round or increase the option pool or do something else, everybody sort of participates in that. And you as the founder are not left with eating all of the dilution. The other thing is, I do think going through the process of doing a priced round will force upon you to sort of professionalize your company in a way that maybe you weren't thinking about before, right? It makes you think about, all right, now I need to go and get a valuation on my stock options and like really set like an exercise price for employees that join us. I need to be more rigorous about the vesting schedules I put on that equity. I need to start putting things like employee handbooks and policies in place. I need to start having board meetings.
Yeah.
Right? I need to update my investors on a regular cadence on what's happening with the business. There is definitely a professionalism aspect to it where I think it just brings the company forward. And it holds the founders accountable to what they're building.
Yeah, it feels like it's becoming more and more of a real company, if you will.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's that to me, it's that first stage of when you sort of really, as you said, become a real company.
Yeah. What are some tips and tricks or tools that you know about that can help founders raise?
So there's a lot of different things out there in the market, and we can talk about a few of them. I would say that the number one thing and this is not a tip or a trick, but the number one thing is to make sure you realize, don't do it alone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, leverage your network of founders, leverage your attorneys, right? Leverage all of these people in the space that could make connections for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because they all have access to different parts of the startup ecosystem, and people are willing to help others. At least I'm an optimist, and that's how I think about this. And so don't do it alone. But within that, I can talk about a few of the things that we at Orrick will oftentimes, help our startups with from like an early stage perspective on tips and tricks. Number one is, if you don't want to use a law firm immediately to set up your company, there are some great low-cost tools out there to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Clerky's a great tool. Like, we have many companies we've worked with that have spent, several $100s just setting up a Delaware corporation and putting the right docs in place using Clerky. Stripe Atlas is another one that many founders use. And like just using basic things like that instead of, tools that are not maybe as oriented towards a startup are tremendously helpful. There's another tool we looked at recently that is in the market called Flowly. It actually helps.
I'm aware of Flowly.
Yep.
Shout out to Flowly.
Shout out to Flowly. Like we're gonna help some of our startups experiment with it and see if it works. It just helps manage the fundraising process. As I mentioned, we started a program at Orrick called Greenhouse. It's led by a gentleman named Patrick Berry. Mm-hmm. Startups that are thinking about working with us or are very early days of working with us and building their companies, we provide a lot of, business side support for free to just be a sounding board for founders and get them resources to get off the ground. Other tools that are out there. I know there are cap table tools out there like Carta that even provide very, very early stage companies with, a freemium version of, the full platform that just help founders do things the right way. But I think the big theme is leverage all these resources, reach out, talk to other founders, get introductions to investors through other founders and through your counsel, and don't do it alone. And I think if you use a lot of these things, you will be on a better path to setting your company up for success than not.
Yeah. And going back to the introductions and the connections, we started this conversation saying, how do you evaluate a founder?
Right.
And if you're introduced by someone that like a high value connection of yours, that gives them kind of a check mark.
It does.
And that's the same thing that happens all over the place. And especially with investors, you're going to get more attention, more time, a step up than if cold outreach doesn't even work.
Totally.
These days. Yeah.
Absolutely. And look, to your point, there are a lot of VCs that, will look at cold outreach, but the best introduction that you can get to an investor is through another founder that investor has worked with or looked at or maybe passed on, or 2, working with your counsel or other service providers in the market in the startup and tech ecosystem. So, use that when trying to build connections with people.
Yeah. What are the most common legal mistakes you see founders make when they're preparing to raise capital?
So, legal mistakes. So some of these we've touched on. One is have the hard conversations early and make sure just like the nuts and bolts of your company are in place.
Yeah.
Like have the equity issued, file your 83Bs, have vesting schedules in place, have IP assigned to the company, use the right type of entity structure. If you're raising venture, it's going to be a corporation, Delaware. I know everybody talks about Nevada and Texas and stuff nowadays, but for now we'll avoid that and say Delaware. So have those like very, very basic things in place before you go out and start raising. And then I would say 2 would be related to that. If you have like a backlog of equity that maybe you've got new employees or consultants or advisors that you promised equity to, a lot of founders forget about that before they start talking about a priced round with an investor, and they get really excited about the priced round, and then lo and behold, the investor drops a term sheet on them. And at that point, it is actually very, very difficult to go back and issue equity to those people that you've promised at a low price, because functionally the value of the business has changed at that point.
Yeah.
And so you end up
literally at that point.
And so it creates a lot of tax risk if you try to grant equity to service providers at that point that were promised equity but haven't been granted it.
Mhm.
So what oftentimes happens is you end up punting granting that equity until after the priced round when you have a new valuation. There's some loss in economic value for those people. And then you as the founder and the company end up in some sort of horse trading negotiation with them to kind of gross them up.
Yeah.
And there's just loss in value there that could have been avoided if you had worked with counsel, gotten those equity grants taken care of before you went into the priced round.
Mhm.
That's I think another big mistake that founders should avoid. And then, I think the other thing is focus more on fit with the VC
Mhm.
and the VCs that you reach out to, and being thoughtful and intentional about that.
Yeah.
Than just brand name and valuation. A lot of founders come at this and say, I have to raise from this top tier VC, and they just approach it in that way, and then they over-index on the price they're getting. Whereas oftentimes it's more about, is this VC interested in the space? Do they know the space? Do they get it? Can they provide the right level of resources that you as the founder need to get your company off the ground? Will they be there and spend time with you and actually think about the business and help you solve problems? I think a lot of times we don't hear enough founders think about it that way.
Yeah.
And that's a pitfall that really should be avoided.
And, seasoned founders know this, but first-time founders don't. The investors that you bring on can make everything else easier.
Way easier.
They can bring investors into your next round.
Mm-hmm.
They can open doors to customers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just...
They can get you that key hire on the management team.
Yeah.
It's tremendous if you pick the right investor, it's tremendous what they can do for you. And if you don't, it's also tremendous the amount of value that they can destroy. I worked with a company, wonderful company. Founder picked the wrong investor at the seed Series A stage. And every time we go to do anything with this company at a board or shareholder level, whether it's raising more capital, whether it's issuing equity grants to employees to top them up, whether it's a commercial agreement, something that, requires that investor to weigh in, they extract their pound of flesh.
Yeah.
And we spend weeks of legal costs, time, the founder's frustrated, and all of that can be avoided if you just think about the right fit over instead of kind of the other factors that are on the surface.
Yeah. When is the right time for 83B?
Oh, so the 83B should, one, you only have to file an 83B if the shares that you're receiving are actually subject to what's called a risk of forfeiture, i.e. vesting. If your shares are fully vested as a founder when you get them, when you set up the company, you don't actually need to file an 83B. If you subject them to vesting later, you might file an 83B at that time. But really, the key is if you receive shares and they're subject to vesting, when you purchase those shares, you need to file an 83B within 30 days of that date.
Okay.
Of completing the purchase and receipt of the shares.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's like nowadays, thank God the IRS allowed us to make 83B filings via a digital signature that used to be wet ink. So nowadays there's really no excuse to not get it in within 30 days. But for those founders or employees that receive stock and they miss that deadline, it's one of the very, very difficult things to fix in an early stage company, especially if the company's successful. If it's not successful, probably doesn't matter that much. But if it's successful, missing an 83B election or, messing up how you grant stock options, from a tax perspective, those things can destroy a lot of value.
So getting to term sheets. I'm trying to decide if I want to go there yet. I've got another question that's top of mind for me.
Go for it.
It regards the amount of detail that a founder should be knowledgeable about on term sheets. We all know about venture deals, the Bible, right? Do you feel
Brad Feld's venture
deals? Yes. Shout out
to Brad Feld and actually Jason Mendelsohn too. What's funny is when I was at Michigan, Jason Mendelsohn's a Michigan guy. Yeah. When I was taking that entrepreneurship class, he came and talked to me in that class, and he really changed my perception on how to think about venture deals and being a venture lawyer. And he used to call me Sally just because like couldn't remember my name. So he just used to call me Sally.
All right.
And but he was awesome guy. I learned a lot in just the few interactions I had with him. And I actually tell every like associate I talk to these days, even today, to read that book.
Yeah.
It's an easy read, but it gives you a very good grounding on what it is that we do as venture lawyers and just how the deals work. And it hasn't changed that much. And it was the first book I read in the space. And so, yes, everybody knows about it. And it's still, I think it's still the Bible.
Right. I have multiple copies. I've got Audible,
Yep.
all of it. But do you feel like founders should know that through and through? And or it can be, can they know that generally and then rely on their counsel?
I think it's the latter.
Okay.
I don't think they shouldn't be required to know it through and through. And if you're working with good counsel that does this day in and day out, they should be able to make the information succinct and commercial enough for you to digest and make the decisions you need to make while they're having your back on the legal side. But I do think it's a good read. I do think it grounds you and orients you in terms of like the fundamentals of a term sheet, which are economics and control. And so, yeah, if you have time as a founder, I'd tell you to page through it because I think it will frame the term sheet conversation with your counsel in a very different light.
Yeah. I always felt like it was a good reference, like read it. And then if something comes up, you refer to it. But I know people who like literally look at those examples and work them through to try to get their head around it. And I think either standpoint is probably valid,
Yeah,
as long as you have good counsel.
that's right.
Yeah,
And
that's the key.
And I think, just even one of the things that is overlooked is just getting really familiar by reading venture deals or whatever other resources you like, just getting really familiar with just how the economics of a term sheet or a venture financing works. Because there are some, I wouldn't say gotchas, but there's some nuance to the economics around a term sheet that founders don't necessarily realize up front, right? Like when there's a valuation on the page, yeah, that is the headline price. But that's not really the actual price when you unpack the terms of the term sheet and you build the model and you see where the dust settles. It's very different. And I think reading up on that before you enter into a term sheet negotiation will just make you better prepared for that negotiation.
Yeah. Talking about some of the things you see on term sheets, what are we seeing with preferences right now? Are they coming up right now very much?
No, I think if you are fortunate enough to be a founder in one of those 4 industries or 5 industries we talked about, and you're off and running and building a potential successful company, you should still generally be seeing a 1x non-participating liquidation preference. Now, on the flip side, if you are a company that is in maybe an industry that's going through like a tough time, or you are a company that raised a few years ago in the top of the market and you're doing a recap or a cram down or what have you, or just a down round. Yeah, I think if you're in one of those spaces, you might expect to see a slightly different liquidation preference than traditional market. Not only in terms of like the multiplier on the preference, but also in terms of like the seniority of the preference, right? Because investors that are coming into a company that's maybe resetting or in a tough industry or space, they are going to be inclined to wanting to make sure that they're the first money out, that they're kind of increasing the floor on their downside protection.
Yeah. In a price round, if the lawyers have taken everything and have disappeared into a black box for a couple of weeks, where do you advise founders? And you are an attorney, so how can founders influence that to get it going a little faster if things seem to be at a stalemate? Like their terms are just not moving forward.
Yeah. So if you should be, so one, we tell our teams to do this regularly, which is when we're working on a deal, we try to touch base with our founders almost on a daily basis and say, status update. Here's where the deal is.
Yeah.
Here's where the deal is. Here's where the deal is. And if you're the founder and you're ideally paying attention to what we're telling you, hopefully you will also be in regular communication with your VC.
Yeah.
And again, this is where fit matters, right? You need to have high bandwidth communication with your investor because unlike M&A, venture rounds and venture financings are a marriage. it is a long-term partnership. This VC is going to be with you nowadays for probably 10 years, right? Like many years ago, it used to be 7 to 8 years between getting like, your first round of financing and taking a company public. That's extended, even in a frothy market. So you have to think about this like a marriage. So you have to have really strong communication early. And if you're involved with your lawyers in the priced round, if you're starting to hear from your lawyers that there are some terms that are getting a bit sticky, you should be in communication with your VC, like on those terms, talking it out at a business level. And then hopefully the investor will filter that through their counsel and instruct them to, give some flex where we need to give some flex to get the deal done.
Yeah. How do you stay mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy working in such a high pressure environment? I mean, you emailed me like 11 o'clock on a Saturday, 11 p.m.
We
on a
don't
Saturday.
stop. We really don't. We don't stop. Look, I think part of it is being a lawyer at a law firm doing what we do. It is very rewarding. No doubt, it's a difficult, high pressure job, but it is very rewarding. And I think even with all the technological changes that are out there today, I think it's a great career path. And I would tell young lawyers to strongly consider it and think about being a partner at a firm. I think it's fun and you get to work on the cutting edge. You do have to decide kind of the person that you are, and all my partners and people we work with handle it differently. I am one of those people. I have a great personal support system. My wife is awesome. She gets it. She works very hard and we balance things out in our life, and she's, does all the things to support me so I can also be successful. So, big kudos to her in that. And I'm also one of those people that just doesn't really shut off, right? Like I just kind of keep it even all the time. And I take my moments where I need to pull back. But, some people have this perception that they do better if they just totally shut off for like a week. Like they just turn it all off, the phone's off, go off the grid for like a week, 2 weeks.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Right. I've maybe done that once in my life, and it was a couple years ago when we were hiking in the Himalayas, and there just was no cell reception. So I was like, all right, I don't really have a choice. But I think for the most part, if you're in this space, you just sort of accept that this is kind of the way the space operates, and you have to be available and accessible, and you build your life around that a little bit. So an example of this is like, we do whatever we want to do in our personal life. We take our trips, we travel, we go wherever, and that just means the work just comes with me for it. I like founders that have worked with me will tell you this. I have been on my laptop negotiating a deal with them in the back of an auto rickshaw in Bombay, right? And I'll do that for them because that's just what it comes with. But at the same time, we're not going to slow our personal life down. And we'll enjoy all the things that come along with that too. So I think if you go into that with that mentality, you can manage the marathon that it is.
That's great. I love that. That's amazing.
So, yeah, I mean, I hope that I can keep it going and do it for many more years, and work with sort of the new advent of founders that are, building companies that are changing the world right now, because I do think we're at this inflection point in terms of the tech that's being built and what it's going to do for society.
Cool. Very cool. So I really appreciate you coming on today. Talking about this stuff helps founders see what's possible and get more insight into what can seem to be a big mystery, which is fundraising.
Thanks for having me. Would love to join anytime and talk more about this. And, my colleagues and I are always available to any founder that wants us to sort of pull the curtain back and tell them about how to go about their fundraising process.
Cool. This is awesome. I'm Helena Fogarty, and this was Inside the Process.